You need people, equity, and the right process and the right vision. That's really the combination that I can see for getting to that finish line if you were shooting for like $1 billion goal for assets under management.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hennche.
Welcome to another episode of The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hennche. Joining us is Matt Green, a true powerhouse in the multifamily development industry and the co-founder of the Green Organization, a $100 million multifamily development and property management company. From his stellar 13-year athletic career, where he clinched national championships and caught the eye of NHL scouts, to his dynamic role as a capital raiser and developer, Matt embodies the essence of dedication and hard work. In 2015, Matt partners with his father, Brian Green, in Buffalo, New York, to lead the management and expansion of numerous luxury apartments throughout New York. Matt aims to document how to build a multi-billion-dollar real estate business, motivating others to do the same and succeed in real estate. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as we just mentioned, it's all about mindset before we started going.
Mm-hmm.
Where does your mindset kind of leading and also striving for success stem from? I did mention your father, so there's a hint there maybe, but I want from you.
Yeah, I think through my athletic background, that kind of got me like learning about mental toughness and a lot of that stuff. So that's kind of where I kind of brought that mindset into everything else that I do. And a lot of times when you're working on things, it's emotional. You got to take the emotional aspect about it and think more logically. But, a lot of it is just mindset, managing your thoughts and focusing on pushing yourself into the next place that you have to go, and physically thinking in between your ears, what's got to happen.
So how do you think the coaching from sports played into that? Like, I think there's many people who've done sports maybe as a time pass, just as like a hobby. But where does it turn into pro or into the pro mindset?
I think it's just repetition, it's like you have to have this discipline to want to be able to do it. You have to have like a set up goal that you want to achieve, I think, and it's got to be big enough where, you have the ambition to work on it every single day. I think if you don't have that first set of framework, then you kind of wonder what you're working on or what you're doing and what you're showing up for. So I think you got to build that initial framework, and then every single day, once you start showing up and working hard on things, then, it becomes repetition and it becomes a habit. And once you build that strong habit, then, you create reliability and consistent results from there.
Yeah, I think a lot of success is in consistency, and obviously you need to improve upon it. You cannot just be consistent with doing bad things. But where do you think that initial ambition that you mentioned, that is kind of the seed for the rest of the chain of events? Have you explored that for yourself at all, where that comes from?
I don't know, there's always been a drive there. So I think even since I was young, I was always had a drive to do things. I mean, even when I was a kid, we'd have like an ice rink in the backyard, and I would always, it's like a routine, we'd always resurface it. We'd always, keep it all in good shape. And there's just always this drive to make things great. And I think, you have to, it's just a level of detail orientedness in your mindset where you just have to get all the details right. And you just want to make sure that you're executing very well. And I think that's where it all stems from, just having that ability to always, want to do well and achieve the greatest things.
How does that translate into what you've started in real estate and what you do on a day-to-day basis in multifamily real estate?
I think, also with athletics too, I think that once you're regimented into that routine where, you're playing every single day, you build up that repetition, and then it's a habit, you just keep going over and over again. You just show up, you don't even worry about the pain or the suffering that you have to go through. It's just, you keep showing up, you keep pushing hard, and then you kind of get addicted to the results that you get. You start winning, and then you want to do more and more and more, and then you just keep going, and it becomes fun. But obviously there's a lot of frustration every day. There's a lot of failures and setbacks, and that's kind of where you learn the most, is through failing. So once you fail and have, I guess, an enjoyment for failing and learning from it, then I think you're just unstoppable from there.
Yeah. I was just wondering, as you said that you get addicted to the results, whether that's the healthy way to play. Do you play because you love the game, or do you play because you love the results?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think to be the most successful, you gotta love the game the most. Like you gotta like showing up and doing all that work. Like that's the main thing. The results are just a byproduct. So you've got to enjoy the main thing every single day. That's where you're going to be the most successful. If you just like the results, then that's going to wear you out quick, and then you're not going to have that longevity. So you have to be invested into the day to day, and that's got to be your main focus.
Yeah. So what do you love about real estate then?
My mindset's very analytical, although I'm kind of like a hybrid because, I understand how it all goes together for the construction side of things and the renovation side. So, I can do numbers, I know how the renovations go, I know how the construction goes. So I kind of know each piece of the whole process. And so I'm overseeing basically the entire process. Obviously, we have a team and everything too. In our office, we've got people that carry out several of these different departments. But, when we started this, it was basically just we had a small team, just my dad and I, we would manage this process. And then as we built our team, we've had people take over each process and expand it from there. But I mean, the day to day, there's just, there's a lot of details. You have to be really smart. You have to have a strong team. You have to have intelligent people that know how to carry out all the tasks. And there's a lot of training involved. It's a big process. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. So what drew you into vertically integrating to a degree where you have your own development?
So basically, we used to actually just acquire mostly multifamily projects where we would just buy them and renovate them or hold them. And then through our market in Buffalo, like there's just a lack of transactional sales in the market. So we had to go out and start building assets within our location because there just wasn't a lot of opportunity to acquire more existing properties. So that's why we got into the development side of things. And now we build out, it could be 162 apartments on one project. It could be 120 units on another site. So we just identify sites, go through the land approvals, and put all the pieces together so that we can continually expand. Because if you just relied on the acquisitions, you just wouldn't have enough deal flow. And that's also part of the reason why we're looking into other markets too, to expand, because in Buffalo, for whatever reason, it's more of a restrictive market. It's not as fluid as like the Southeast or Florida, and those types of markets where you get a lot of transactional volume. And I think that's where we've started to look into, is just so you can trade deals, and you want to be competing with other institutions and REITs so that when you purchase an asset and improve the value of it, you've got somebody to sell it to, because there's already active parties with a lot of capital that are interested in those assets. So I think that's more the direction we're shooting for.
Has Buffalo, as a market, I'm very unfamiliar with it.
Mm-hmm.
We're more invested so in the markets that you mentioned,
Yeah.
And has Buffalo benefited from kind of that New York City exit, the COVID kind of people getting a little bit more into the rural cities? Is it something that you've as a firm benefited from?
I think the suburbs are obviously very strong markets. And the nice thing about the low transactional value or low transactional volume is that, you get to work, hand in hand with sellers, because basically the only way to get a bunch of deals in our market is to basically, you got to send out letters, you got to cold call, like you got to build these strong relationships in these markets to really expand. So I think there's a benefit to that, but it's a longer term strategy because you have to cultivate these relationships over time. A lot of the deals that we've acquired, it's taken 3 or 4 years to make them come through to fruition, because when you talk to a seller and you meet them and you start building a relationship, they're not going to want to sell on the first time you talk to them. So you got to take time, communicate, and just stay in touch, and then deals start to come along as you focus on it.
Yeah. So what are some of the other markets that you're trying to venture out?
Right now we have a land deal in Daytona Beach that we're working on. So we're going through city approvals on that for zoning. And, that's kind of the main market we've been focused on right now. So that'll be a 380 unit project ground up. And that's our main focus out of the market. And then we've got a couple in-market deals that we're working on for 162 units that we're working on as well. But right now it's a very challenging time to expand because you got to deal with the interest rates being higher than usual, and you've got just a lot of other forces that you got to deal with to make deals work, which didn't exist prior when the rates were the 3.5% 4% range. So you have some obstacles to overcome.
Yeah. So Florida is obviously a different animal. Do you have a local partner in that, or you're doing that on your own as the green organization?
So right now, as the green organization, we're going through the municipal approvals, and once we get the zoning, that'll be kind of our next step to figure out, who are we going to reach out to for partnering on it. I mean, ideally, we'd like to probably partner with somebody that's in that market that already has, maybe it's a site contractor or somebody that's already, working in that market. That would be kind of the preferred setup for it. But I mean, who knows? It could be just an LP, that's well capitalized, and we'll play out the routes from there once we get the zoning approved. But there's a bunch of options that we have that we're exploring, and we'll have to vet each one and see which one will make the most sense.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think right now there's a lot of different challenges in the market, especially moving into Florida. Insurance is one of those.
Hmm.
And then you have the interest rate environment, which is still in uncertainty. I think that's something we've been covering for like 18 months or so, the uncertainty of
I know.
interest rates going into 2 year strip. Yeah.
And now that we see that
Um,
inflation is up a little bit, you start to even wonder if they're even going to bring interest rates down, keep them the same, or maybe even potentially increase them if inflation they don't feel is being controlled properly.
yeah. How do you think that affects overall inventory? So we're still seeing developments coming to an end, actually units being delivered to market.
Hmm.
But what we're not seeing a whole lot of is new developments getting started. So while I think for like the next 12 to 18 months, we will see a lot of inventory coming to the market that's kind of coming out of the cheap money, the back end of that cheap money.
Hmm.
But now in the new interest rate environment, a lot less development is happening overall.
Yeah, I think construction starts are a little bit delayed, primarily because of the interest rates. Because think about it, if you have to bring in LP money and you look at investors in the capital stack, it's like if debt is more expensive, the cost of equity is going up as well. So it's just the entire capital stack has gotten more and more expensive, which makes it harder and harder to do deals unless you have a lot of cash on your own to make things flow, which is rare, because with development, it's very cash intensive, and without partnering, it's very hard to expand to massive levels. So you have to find really strategic people that you can partner with that have capital, and you can establish a deal to put something that makes sense together, which is very hard right now. So I think that's why a lot of people
Yeah.
are on the sidelines just waiting or structuring things in a way that makes sense. I mean, there's different subsidies and programs you can look into, and I think there's opportunities in that area of things. But we also got construction costs; those are high. That makes it challenging. Labor is getting harder. It's harder and harder to find people that are competent, that know how to do things. So overall, I think construction and doing anything successfully is it seems like it's almost 5 or 10 times harder than what it used to be.
Yeah. I think that's kind of through, like, even if you speak to, could be completely different industries, whether it's a restaurant industry or retail, labor in generally, qualified, and I'll add the word motivated labor, seems to be a serious issue.
Yeah, it's just hard to find people that, want to put in that effort to make things successful. And I think even people that are qualified is really hard to come by. And I think that's why a lot of people in business struggle too. If you don't have the right people in the right places, then you're going to have a lot of problems that you have to fix. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest struggles, I think, over the next 5, 10 years is having the ability to find the right people that have the right skills and all the right tools to be able to make something continuously grow and be more successful. And I think it's going to strain a lot of the best people because if you have a lack of good people, your top players are going to be, strained and stressed because they're going to be taking on more of a workload.
Yeah, that's the thing. So how do you, as the green organization, how do you define success for yourself? You keep mentioning successful, but then one of the things I've learned over the years, everybody defines success differently for themselves. How do you in your family define success?
I think to be to create more success and be successful, you got to take care of, whether it's like a resident or people on your team. I think those are kind of your main priorities. And then once you take care of all those aspects within the business or within family, then everything else seems to flow. So I think you got to take care of all of the things. Success is like the result, that's always the result. But I think you got to work on all the stuff in between to really continuously maintain your success and continue building on it.
But what defines that? That's really what I'm trying to get at. What defines taking care of employees or the family for you? Like, what does it boil down to? Is that, for example, you do want to build $1 billion company, but let's say you don't hit that mark, or you maybe outgrow it dramatically.
Right.
What do those words "taking care" mean to you in that regard? Whether it's family or the company, the employees within that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all to get to that level, it's all going to be about the people, I think, and the quality of people you're able to bring on. And that's really what's going to define it is, having obviously the right vision to get there and the right people that can help push it along faster to get to that end result. And you have to have, I think a lot of capital is going to be crucial. You need a lot of equity, you need people, equity, and the right process and the right vision. That's really the combination that I can see for getting to that finish line if you were shooting for like $1 billion goal for assets under management.
Yeah. I've once watched an interview from Bill Gates where he's speaking about how important people are to Microsoft. And despite it being such a well-capitalized and massive organization, he said, if you, don't quote me on the exact number, but he said, like, if you take the top 100 people out of the organization, it will crumble.
Yeah, it's all down to the people that you have. They can control the process, and that's what drives the results. So your people are the main key component to being successful. I mean, you could have one person that can handle the job of like 2 or 3 people if they're competent, but or you could have, if you hire like 3 people that don't have experience, then it's like counterproductive. That's why your main people, it's so important to be able to have the ability to find them and keep them for the long term.
Yeah. So how do you go about attracting top talent? How do you, as an organization, attract people that are, and then do you have an office in Buffalo itself where you want people to come to office, or are you attracting people also remotely?
Everybody basically works into our office. So we don't have any remote people, but that's like the magic formula, right? Is finding the right people. So I think that's the hardest part of the whole process, is bringing the right people in that want to work hard, have the ambition, the skills, and it's not easy to find them. I mean, you got to keep searching every single day, and you should always continue to look for the best people that you can find, whether it's for management or finances. Like, there's so many different angles that you have to have good people in that it's very challenging, and you have to just find the right people through networking, whether you're going to like an event with people that are in that specific category or that niche, or if you have referrals, you can look for like headhunters that can help find people for you. It's a very challenging process, and I think a lot of people are struggling with it right now. I hear a lot of stories of people that are just not able to expand and grow because they just don't have the right people in place. And it's really like the magic question, how do you find the right people? And I think it takes a lot of time. You have to get out in the market and really dig for it. And once you find the right people, you have to retain them and keep them on your team.
Yeah. Do you think there is a bottleneck to that because you're located in Buffalo? Like, I know many firms or companies that, they consider remote, which this could be US based or it could be globally, which gives them access to a lot more talent. Or, for example, if the firm wouldn't be in Buffalo, but in a bigger city like Atlanta, New York, Dallas, you would have access to a larger pool. And again, similar like what you said with the assets themselves, you want somebody to exit into, like you want the REITs or the bigger players to be participating in those markets. I think having that also creates a secondary layer of, there is a different pool of employees that you can work with.
Yeah, I think in Buffalo you are kind of limited because, like you said, you're not in a broader market. This is like Buffalo's more of like a tertiary market. I think that's a good question because, if you were in like a major city, you'd have a lot more people in that area. that could be potential candidates for, whatever position you're looking for. I see sometimes too that, some companies, like some people in their finance department, like they work satellite, they're from a different state, but obviously they're very competent and they're able to, carry out that work from a remote location. But I do see that from time to time too, where people are, in different locations working for companies. And I think location has a big thing to do with it. You got to be in a well-populated area, and you're going to have more opportunity with prospects and candidates for sure.
Yeah, so there's a couple of investors that have basically made the jump that you're about to make or you want to make, whereas they started as multifamily syndicators moving into development, and one of the things I've heard two of them tell me is that they wanted to go into the major markets because that's also where they have talent and where they can rely on an ecosystem of companies serving them, which is something that they realize is a bottleneck. If you, for example, I'll give you an example in Texas, College Town. And the city itself has some potential, but you don't really have that same network of vendors that you can fall back up on in Dallas. For example, property management and certain aspects of it. You just don't have a vendor network. And which also means that larger plays like Reeds or BlackRock, or for example, they won't participate in those markets because they want options. They want options for exits and they want options for vendors.
Yeah, exactly.
So they will drive most of the transaction volume in those more prime markets.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, look at BlackRock. You're not going to see them in like Buffalo, New York, for example. You're going to see them in like Miami or Texas or other big markets that, have that transactional volume like we were talking about earlier. It's like you got to be in very fluid transactional markets really to expand and grow, because otherwise you're going to lack deal flow and you're going to lack opportunities to grow. So I think that's important. And as far as the people too, it's just like you said, you're really only going to learn it from doing it. Whether you go to school or not, it's like if you're not working on it, learning directly with direct experience, then you're not going to have that skill set that you're going to need to really grow, whether it's in property management or construction or any industry that you're talking about.
Yeah. So what gave you the confidence to move into development from originally being in multifamily and mainly driving value add?
It's something that we just kind of got into prior. It was like there was a lack of deals, so it's almost like we didn't have a choice. There weren't that many deals in Buffalo to expand with, so we basically had to send letters out. We would figure out who had parcels of land that were the right size and in the right location that we wanted to expand and build properties on. So once we had done these mailings, we would get responses, and once we reviewed the responses and picked the ones that were, whether they were in a commercial corridor or in the right spots that made sense for developing apartments, we would review the zoning, take it to the town, and figure out how we could, get a project proposed on each individual property. So we'd have to work with civil engineers, architects, and build a development team to be able to carry out that process for getting the approvals and then getting it basically shovel ready. So obviously it's a very complicated process, but the nice thing about it is it's something that, it has deferred maintenance. When you build it from scratch, you're not going to have a million work orders coming in. You're going to be more sustained with just the property management, leasing, keeping your vacancy low. Those are kind of your main things when you're building things from scratch. So that was another really appealing thing about the new construction is you're not going to have to repair a 40-year-old building. There's not going to be infrastructure cost and all these things that you're going to have to pay if you bought an old building. Older buildings can be very expensive, and it costs a lot of money to make all these repairs. I mean, you've got masonry work. If you got brick buildings, buildings that are very old and they're not maintained, and you run into that with multifamily owners, is sometimes they want to make money, so they cut costs, and then you have issues like they kind of jip out on the capital improvements. So then if that happens year over year over year, 40 years later, you have to fix walls, you have to do repointing. Like there's so much maintenance and cost that goes into that. We're working on that right now with a project where this one building is all brick. So all the entries are all brick and a lot of them are starting to deteriorate. So we have to put a capital improvement plan together to go and repair one or two of them a year because, it's very expensive to do all of them at once. So that's why, new construction and getting into that aspect was also nice is because it's new. You don't have to worry about it for at least a minimum of 10 years. And it's a nice model where you don't have to have a extremely large maintenance staff. You just have to have a very strong property management team. And then the place will run smoothly from there.
Mm-hmm. And the good thing is, the substance. Ideally, you've been so involved in the entire process and who is your subcontractors and your different vendors that you know what kind of work you're getting and the potential headaches that you shouldn't have, that you mitigated by doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the other thing too, is like finding the labor in a smaller market can be more challenging too. There's just less of a pool of vendors to choose from. So, that makes it more challenging, so I don't know. It's just no matter what you're going to do, it's always going to be hard. So you just have to figure out your process, find a way, and make it work.
You got to pick your heart. That's basically
yeah, exactly.
the line here. It's like pick your heart and then go for it.
It's hard not to make money. It's hard to make money. It's whatever it is, it's going to be hard. So you just got to follow through and work hard on it.
So part of going into development, how did you build you've spoken about processes and everything. How did you figure out the process of what does it actually take to go through with the start to finish, maybe change the zoning on it so you can actually make sense of it? Did you hire that expertise or you build it yourself, or how did you go about that process?
So with everything you do, you have to find the biggest expert in it and basically hire them and hire their expertise because it's impossible to know everything. And you don't have to be the smartest person to be able to do all this stuff. You just have to know the right people and make sure that you're working and employing the best people that can do all the tasks that you need to get done. It's just finding the right people and, using their expertise to get the job done.
I guess a different way to ask the question is, if you don't know what you don't know, how do you know who to ask?
That's a good question too. I think if you're working on a land deal and you don't know all the steps, I mean, some things that you don't know, you're going to miss and then you're going to figure it out eventually. So it's like, but then some of it, so you run into some of that stuff, but then some of the stuff you don't know that you never figure out, that can cost you a ton of money too. So I think you gotta kind of bring all the best minds together in each category, whether it's, zoning, architectural, development. You have to bring all the right minds together. And then hopefully, once you start overlapping with each different person, hopefully you catch everything that you need to catch. And you have to learn very quickly. If you don't learn quickly and, you don't learn from the mistakes and you keep making them over again, that's going to make it very tough on yourself. And you're going to have a lot of problems. So you have to be a very fast learner.
But you're probably going to run out of capital very soon if you operate like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be a lot of waste. You're going to lose profit. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. So you have to make sure that you're on top of as much as you can. And if you find mistakes, you got to correct them right away. So you're optimizing as much as you can and making the best ROI that you can and cutting as much loss as you can and fixing all the problems. No matter what you do, there's going to be a problem. You just have to try and find them all, focus on them, and fix them all.
The properties that you're developing, those are built to rent, right?
Yep. Yeah, they're all for rent.
What is your long-term strategy? Is that a long-term hold, or is that something where you potentially leaning into selling them off in like 7 to 10 years when kind of the smaller headaches start creeping into the building itself?
Yeah, I think that all plays a factor into it. I mean, we've got some assets that were built in the 60s and 70s that we've done a lot of the capital improvements on. So a lot of that stuff's been taken care of, and we renovate a lot of the units that we purchased that are older. So we spend, like this one project, it was 156 units, and we spent about $3 million renovating all the units and working on the infrastructure. And then we built another 44 units at the site of new construction. So we turned it into a 200-unit complex. And I think, with that strategy, since we've put so much capital into it, we would probably retain it for the longer term. But let's say it was something that like, hey, we've already owned it for like 10 years. we'd either have to you'd have to decide, like, are you going to renovate the units or are you going to trade it? You see a lot of people too where they renovate maybe 10, 15 of the units, prove the concept, and then trade it from there too. But at least personally for our plans, our goal is always to hold the properties long term.
I mean, I think especially if you look at it, you can buy a building that's built in the 60s, or you can, which basically is now, you're looking at a good 65 years ago. Or someone in your age can live off the new building that you're building right now for the rest of your life, literally.
Yeah.
Like you can cash out, refinance at some point, you can just hold it indefinitely.
I think if you're smart too with the capital improvement plans and budgets, and you're always allocating a capital improvement budget each and every year towards the property, obviously if it's a new construction, you're not going to need to do that for about 10 years. But if you do that, like, that'll help you in the long run, because if you don't make those improvements, in the end, you're going to have to either take a cut on the price, or there's going to be somewhere you're going to have to sacrifice or compromise because, you didn't maintain the property. So I think if you focus on maintaining the property year over year and spending money towards it, then you're going to be more successful in the long run and save yourself money.
Yeah. So it seems to me that people that are in the personal step of building wealth, they are more transactional because they need those faster exits.
Right.
And that people that are more in the stage of sustaining wealth, they are actually in favor of holding assets for long.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that too, where some people just they sell it right before all the problems occur too, and then the next guy's got to figure it all out. So I think timing is important too. Just selling things at the right time, because like you said, the longer you hold on to things, it's like insurance companies. They traditionally like newer assets because they know that there's not going to be as many capital improvements on the properties. So I think there's definitely a strategy in that, and I think there's certain investors that target that to optimize their return, because once you start getting into maintenance and properties get older and older, they're going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Actually, now that you bring it up, lately in New York City, some of the multifamily has traded for land value, and some of it actually below land value, because there's so much deferred maintenance and there's so much rent stabilized tenants in there.
Yeah.
It basically holds zero value, and that you can only operate it as an operational loss unless you're a complete slumlord, maybe, and you just.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope they don't do some of that stuff in Buffalo, but I know some of our tenant law in New York has gotten so challenging that you're not able to get people out that don't pay, and the tenants can take advantage of the landlord at such a high level now than what used to be. Like before COVID, everything was manageable, but now that they have this new Tenant Protection Act, it's a lot more challenging because they gave a lot of the tenants a lot more rights, and the landlords have a lot less rights, and it can take you 3-4 months to get somebody that isn't paying rent out of the property, which if your rents are $1,500, that's $6,000 you're losing. And, by the time you get court dates, I mean, it could be even longer. So I think it's made New York much, much harder to invest in. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons we're looking into other states, is because, it's like going back 5 years in New York, because, you can do a 3-day pay or quit. Like you can charge, different fee structures that normally you can't charge in New York State. Like there's a lot more opportunity outside of New York State, and New York State is making things much more restrictive, which is making it harder to do business in the state.
I think there's a real flight of capital because of that. I think that the people who are voting for those decisions don't understand the economic tail end of that. Like they don't look into the future 10, 20 years, and they're like, okay, we're actually seeing a lot less development. We're seeing less renovation. We'll basically have all these buildings we're not taking care of, which doesn't lead to improved affordable housing.
Mm-hmm. No, I think New York is sort of doing a disservice to itself and making it struggle more than it has to, because they're making everybody want to leave the state, which is making it less profitable. It's harder to start businesses, and it's just impossible to do things in New York State. If we didn't have these land deals that we're currently working on right now, I mean, we'd be mostly focused more in the South and in other states. But since we already have obligation for some of these deals that we've already been working on for 2-3 years, we got to see them all the way through. But after that, we're looking out of state.
I think this is a real issue that policymakers are not picking up on. Like New York City itself 50% of the tax is paid by the 1%. That used to be just before in 2017, that used to be 40%, which means that the majority of the tax income does come from the wealthiest people, but at the same time, they're driving out the wealthiest people
Right.
and the work they're doing. Like they're encouraging capital to leave the state and the city. At the same time, those are the biggest taxpayers. And at the end of the day, business owners, developers, landlords, those are the ones providing jobs and housing. So if you encourage those to leave the state or the city, like I think they haven't really thought out how that plays out in a 10, 25 year time horizon.
No, I think New York is basically shooting themselves in the foot because they're discouraging new business and expansion within the state, and they're pushing everybody out of the state. And I think that's going to really show up in the numbers, like you said, 5-10 years from now.
Meanwhile, Florida and Texas is like, please come. We're taking on anybody who's willing to do business. Please come.
Yeah, look at Florida. You got 1,000 people a day moving there. I mean, you got huge numbers of people migrating to different states that are more business friendly. They have less taxes, and you can make a lot more money living in some of these other states just by making a switch in where you live.
Well, Matt, one of my clothing questions that I like to ask is, what is a life well lived for you?
I think a life well lived is basically having less worry about finances. You're able to, you don't have financial stress. You're able to make some of your own decisions. You don't have to worry about having people make decisions for you. You can control your own destiny. I think that's kind of what it's all about, is being able to live life on your own terms, basically.
Yeah. I think that's also to some degree the only way to live in the US, like, because otherwise you just feel so beaten. And again, it's choose your heart. You can work hard to get to the point where you can control your destiny, or you can live the hard life by not controlling your destiny.
Yep. Yeah. No matter which way you go, it's going to be hard. So you got to really focus. I mean, your best route. I mean, you can't help your community. You can't help your family. You can't help your team without, creating that successful framework. So you have to, you're better off going the hard route to, making more money, doing more deals, and focusing on expansion, because you can help so many more people, and it's much more fulfilling that way.
Yeah. So what are the next steps for the Green organization? Like, what are the immediate next goals other than developing those existing properties? But what's like the next big thing that you're working through right now?
Next big thing that we're working through is, getting some of these, as far as the Green organization, is just focusing on getting some of these land deals that we've been holding for 2-3 years, getting those developed out, building another 250 units there, getting that leased up, cash flowing, and then, pushing down into the south on a deal down there for 350 units, trying to build that out, put a partnership program together with that so we can expand it and grow quickly with it and build out that development. That's our current focus.
Nice. Where can people best connect with you if anything struck them? Like, what's the best channel to reach out to you?
They could reach out to myself on LinkedIn or Instagram as well.
Nice. And we will make sure to add all of that in the show notes, including you have a personal website as well as the greenorganization.com.
Yep.
And we will add all of those. So thank you so much, Matt, for making the time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me on, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.